This is, of course, the Wayside Cleanup Thursday morning office hours, 9 a.m. You're all being recorded, so feel free to shut your video off and lurk quietly if you prefer. And it is your opportunity to ask us questions, for us to convey information to you for the week. And it has been I won't say it's been a quiet week, but not a lot of news to pass along to you, I think. One thing we have been talking about is getting a little bit more robust. We always talk about PFAS, so the interesting PFAS piece as we have talked about the private water supply testing, and I've mentioned the results started coming in, and it is beginning to pick up steam a little bit. So just to show, I think this should show you kind of what the results are beginning to look like, and the numbers are still pretty small, so don't read too much into it. But 50 results are in. We have another 111 results pending. So, like I said, the results should be coming in faster and faster. And the good news is 94% of this small sample size have either non-detects or low levels of PFAS. A couple in the 10 to 20 part per trillion range. And so far, that was me knocking on wood, only 2% of them coming in above the MCL, which is, of course, just a single well at this point. So,
may I ask what the reporting limit was?
You may ask. I don't know offhand, but it's using the, it's the drinking water methods.
Right.
Water supply drinking water methods. So it's
should be around 5 then, I would suppose.
Okay. Yeah. Does anybody know offhand?
Yeah, just curious.
It's probably buried in material I have. So far so good. And as you read in the news, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, there are, of course, a number of public water supplies that have found PFAS, and the department is working with them to figure out ways to manage it. And every case is unique because every city and town public water supply has different circumstances, from the number of wells they have, the treatment they have, the co-contaminants they have. I certainly have learned a lot about the presence of iron and manganese and the problems that it presents in treatment of public water supplies, and the water chemistry, and something as simple as oh, maybe they could hook up to MWRA, but if the water chemistries are substantially different, that's not an easy thing to do either. So there are a lot of variables that take a lot of time and effort, and our drinking water program and the regional staff are on the front lines of all that.
How is the, you're also sampling wastewater, right? Or there someone is?
Well, there are different things going on. And I'm not sure I can do justice to the laundry list of
you mentioned it last week, right?
Activities going on. This work being done with USGS on sampling surface water bodies. On the wastewater side, a lot of the focus is on residuals and trying to figure out kind of what's in them and how to manage those appropriately.
Right, sampling at the POTW or whatever, right?
I believe it has. I know it has been done, at least in some cases. I'm not sure whether it is a kind of across the board, everybody is sampling. So I don't know.
I was just curious because I guess last week or whatever, the Wisconsin, whatever they are, business lobby, whatever you want to call them, whatever. It's sued the state for sampling saying, you're targeting industrial people, blah, 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 blah. So it was interesting.
Paul, do you have a contact as to who would know the answer as to the program or the testing of either treatment plants or residuals or sludges or that sort of stuff? Is there someone in the department you could point us to?
Um, or so they may be different people, but I think Weldon Langley may be for the kind of wastewater related issues, including residuals and whatever the discharges might be. Weldon is probably a good person for that. And I know he sits in on many of the meetings that I sit in as we do this as a group. Overall, Kathy Baskin is the assistant commissioner for the water programs. I wouldn't start with her though. She's busy trying to deal with all of these things. So and I'm not sure that a lot of it. There are. We want to sample probably more things out there than we have the capacity to sample right now, the resources to sample, or the permissions to sample things. So it's working through a number. In the grand scheme of things, there are so many research projects that could be done, and in some of what we do are trying to keep up with research projects that other people are doing, and then presenting us with the results and saying, okay, react to this. So we're trying to both do things proactively, focusing on the areas that we think pose the greatest risk of harm to health, which is the immediately the drinking water issues, and try to balance kind of where we're directing our proactive priorities to also reacting to things that are discovered and which may in fact be important, so we do have to follow up on them. And kind of the piece example of that I would point out would be the PFAS and pesticides, where the information was presented to us that some sampling had been done in the Anvil 10+10, which was used for mosquito control. And basically the question we all asked and was asked of us is, what does this mean? And is this widespread? Is this kind of a problem? So we looked into it. We put resources into gathering the samples, doing the analysis, creating a body of work that we could then turn to EPA and say, okay, we're seeing this problem. It's probably not limited to Massachusetts. Can you help provide some resources? And out of that, as you probably have seen in the newspapers, EPA did further work, and we all worked with the various companies, and the focus soon came to the coatings on the containers that the pesticides were stored in, leaching out. One result of that is the Anvil 10+10 that we will be using this year, apparently, to spray for mosquitoes. Will be in steel drums delivered in steel containers that were not treated internally. So there are interesting things like that, which are fascinating and really interesting to follow up on. But they keep coming up, so we're trying to balance this wide range of things that we're looking at. Wayside cleanup, of course, comes at it from a certainly slightly different perspective. We are in some ways following some of the other programs. For instance, the public water supply sampling that's done as they find contamination. Part of our role is to look at these locations and work with the rest of the department to do the source discovery to try to answer the question where it's coming from. And sometimes the answers are nice and easy and clear, or relatively clear, and sometimes it, going through the process of looking at multiple possible sources, none of them particularly obvious, but could be contributors, and working out you know, the site assessment plan to figure out kind of where it might be coming from and working back, which is also kind of interesting and satisfying work for the staff to do, especially if it ends up with finding a responsible party. Somewhat less satisfying if you do all that work and you still don't have a clear idea where it's coming from. We're seeing the range of things.
Well, if you want something new to worry about in PFAS, it's interesting studies on PFAS and microplastics are now coming out. So we not only have to worry about all the little microplastics floating around in the ocean and freshwater estuaries, etc., but now we can worry about PFAS on the microplastics.
Well, I have to say, life was a lot simpler when what we were worried about was old AFFF that had % levels of PFAS in it. And
Right.
or that car, or that rain shedding car stuff, or whatever that the car washes, which I think was like 20% PFAS.
Yeah, not Rain-X, mind you, though, which is what I use in my.
Not Rain-X.
Not Rain-X, that does not have fluorinated compounds. I forget
Paul,
what it is.
The after spray you put on so you don't have to dry the car because it shed water.
Well, yeah, in the ski waxes, so it's in the car waxes, and we're going to be kind of chasing after a lot of these things, and part of the question is, okay, you're driving around with a car that may be shedding PFAS. Is that enough to contaminate wells? Is that where does it concentrate? What are the locations that are acting as point sources that you might have problems? And this is where the private well sampling stuff is going to be interesting. The broader non-point sources, the drippings from the cars, the atmospheric deposition that might be occurring. What effect does that have? And are we seeing measurable impacts, particularly to groundwater, because that's what we're looking at from that? And that's, if we see that in all of this data, then that will certainly give us a lot to think about how we proceed kind of regulating all of this.
speaking of that, Paul, if I could, if people see the notice of advanced rulemaking notice that EPA published a couple months ago,
Mhm.
considering regulating PFAS as hazardous substance or as a hazardous waste under RCRA. I don't know if the formal notice is out yet, but here's my question. So as more and more people start using POET systems for treating private wells, what's going to be the disposition of the carbon filtration medium that gets removed and replaced?
Well, I mean, in the short term, the big question will be whether they regulate it as a hazardous substance or hazardous waste. My understanding, well, I don't have any more of an understanding than you do. My bets are, well, I'm not even if it's a hazardous substance like the PFAS compounds are regulated the same way we regulate all the other compounds under CERCLA. I think that certainly makes the disposition of all this stuff a lot easier. If it's considered a hazardous waste, obviously with the contained in rule on hazardous waste, everything becomes a lot more complicated for that. And even with that, I think the disposal of things like the carbon from POET systems, those are somewhat somewhat contained, that would increase the cost for disposing of them. I think a lot of them, well, some of them may be sent out to be regenerated, and I think high heat has been shown to, high enough heat has been shown to do that, and recycling carbon. But it would put it in the same kind of categories of things like carbon treating PC or TC that would be hazardous waste as well.
I mean, before too long, we're going to have a lot of companies that are selling, renting, replacing, and managing POET systems, taking that material and disposing of it somewhere, and we're creating new sites for that.
It applies to a lot of waste streams, Barry, not just that one, but the fact that these are homeowners and the number of them may go up with PFAS in their management stream. It calls out for the larger question of, what do we do with these derived waste materials?
Right.
A town well, let alone a POET system.
Right. That. Yep. So
Amen.
We'll be following kind of that classification. So I don't know. I haven't heard which way that they're going, but certainly having it considered a hazardous substance under CERCLA would help us in other areas at various sites and DoD sites around the state.
To your knowledge, no one in the department is thinking of regulating it under 21C separately. C as in Charlie.
To my knowledge, that has not been brought up. So far obviously we go beyond the EPA RCRA program in regulating waste oil as a hazardous waste. I don't think it's very common for us to do that for any other chemicals. And if EPA adopts it, certainly we would be adopting it as well.
Paul, can I ask you or maybe Liz a question on behalf of one of my colleagues in our shop?
Yeah, I guess that's why we're here. Yeah, but I haven't said this in a while, but one of the things about these office hours is that you're perfectly free to ask questions. We're not guaranteeing an answer.
Well, and I fully appreciate that, but that has been the case for decades, and
right.
The department has been artful in that regard, but very honest and forthright, and we appreciate that. That's why we're a community of professionals, right?
We'd like to think so.
So it's actually a simple question, and you may or may not have seen it, because I know one of my colleagues has probably reached out to a couple of you. And there are a few of these, but this is the one in particular. I have two different instances in different regions where our team is looking at the process to do a petition to basically get a potentially productive aquifer into a non-potentially productive aquifer designation. And we can't find any examples where from the LSP community or the regulated community folks have done that. And we're just sort of looking to make sure if we go through the petition process, and it is two completely different kinds of settings, but both of them are PPA as a result of the hydrologic atlases and not zone 2 or any of that specific stuff. So how do you initiate the petition process? And is there an example we could look at to make sure we're efficient in how we decide whether to try to do this petition or not?
So I think I can answer that. I don't think anyone has ever fully done that petition process. And I see, is Gerard still on the line? Because I know in Southeast region, in one case, there was a party that went through the initial steps. So Southeast region was in the position of trying to assist them interpreting the regulations as the process was laid out and trying to take them through the steps that are in the regulations. But I think in the end, they didn't complete it. I think they found another way to designate the water as not a GW1 area.
That's correct. They did start the process, but in looking at it in more detail, the land use actually met the definition of non-potential. So they went that way. It didn't have to go through the entire process. But I think that's the closest we ever came.
If someone were to try to figure it out, are you the right person to get coaching from, Liz? Or is someone like Gerard in the region that it's connected to a partner in exploring this?
Well, I think when it was proposed in the Southeast region, it started out with the region contacting me. We interpreted what the process was that was laid out. We kind of worked together in the beginning, and then I think Southeast started to manage that process. So I would envision it would probably go the same way.
We actually worked together on those things.
We did.
Steph, there is an old DEP policy on determining non-potential drinking water areas.
This actually, Elliot, I think we're talking about a different case, which this is not determining that it's a non-potential drinking water source area per the definition and the land uses, but it's a case-specific determination where you actually get the area reclassified.
Okay. Never mind.
That's very helpful to our team, and the fact that these are recorded, I don't even have to take notes. I can tell them, listen, from 9:19 or 9:20 until, so may follow up directly with you, Liz, and you know why.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Oh, that was
Liz,
it for me.
thank you, Gerard.
Thank Liz and Gerard. All right. Any other way we can be helpful? Any other questions you might have?
I won't speak on behalf of Roger, but I think you all know the Tech Practices Group is spending a bunch of time looking at collecting all of the data for everything sort of PFAS and whether it's background or it's releases, just to amalgamate everything possible and looking at potentially supporting some additional research to help us better understand a bunch of the things you were talking about, Paul. Mm-hmm. And I think trying to make sure there's not duplication of effort, or at least there's a level of collaboration if there's some science, some actual further testing to be done, is something that a handful of us have talked about a few times and will probably want to talk about some more. Who's the right person to coordinate that kind of conversation directly with? Is it you, Paul? Is it Ken?
Well, at least start with me, I think. Depending upon kind of what you're proposing and what we have, we certainly, there are a lot of people working in the department on it, as I mentioned before, so there may be some overlap with work that's already been going on. I sit in on the weekly DEP-wide meetings that we try to get an overview of what's happening in the different programs and in the different regions. So depending on what you're thinking about, somebody may already be looking at it or would be really interested in it. Obviously, the Office of Research and Standards has been collecting a lot of that information and data and trying to make sense of it as well. And Mark Smith in ORS is the lead, sitting in on the same meetings, although he has a number of his staff working on various aspects of it.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I'll probably want to circle back with both of you in the near term. Great.
Yeah, one of the good things for ORS is they were able to steal Nihar Mahanti away from the Northeast region. in Nihar back in the early 90s when he was in waste site cleanup. Oh no, he was in BWR in the water programs then. He helped us out doing the leaching models for the Method 1 standards, and then went to Northeast and was working there. And ORS stole him back, and he's now doing a lot of work on leaching, PFAS leaching to groundwater in various circumstances. So it's great to have that resource back, kind of working on this specifically.
I don't see Diane Phillips here today, but sort of to follow up from Duff's, so she did a presentation last night to our CHMM group on the multi-sector general permit for stormwater and stormwater pollution prevention plans. But one thing that came out of that is, unlike the individual permits, because Massachusetts is, DEP is apparently requiring PFAS testing for the individual permits, but it is not required under the multi-sector general permit. Something to think about. So apparently individual permit stuff, they're testing PFAS. There should be data somewhere.
Matt, are these the dewatering permits you're talking about?
No, storm, multi-sector general permit, stormwater, right? So.
Thanks.
If you have an individual permit, I guess certain individual dischargers, the department is trying to gather data on whether there might be PFAS contributions from them, from their stormwater.
Matt, who led the presentation? I missed it.
Diane Phillips. So. Tricia will send you a copy.
Okay, and any other observations, questions?
Pictures.
What, Matt?
Pictures.
Pictures. You have,
the fun part of the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have no more official business. There's the option for pictures or recipes or updates on your gardens or whatever you may have going on. Our only big news is our neighbor got a puppy, so our dog is going crazy every time she goes in the backyard because there's a little puppy next door.
No, it's not the department's job, but somebody make it rain before it gets too dry again. It's remarkable how much we've not had precipitation the last 6 or 8 weeks. We could use the rain.
We'll look into that, Duff.
I think they already have. There's rain predicted for next week, Duff. So I think the department's doing its job already.
Sunday. How about Sunday?
Bye, Elliot. I think we're probably running the course of this as well. Yeah, are we in drought status yet? Have they
been in drought, right?
Yeah, I think they loosened up on it here over the winter, but
abnormally dry, I think, is the current classification, but it's awful lot of fire danger occurs when the wind picks up. And for April, that's pretty unusual in New England. It really is. Anyway, thank you for the advice, Paul and Liz and Gerard. More to come. It's good to see you all.
Okay. Good seeing you all. And we'll do this again next week. Come prepared with questions and have a good weekend.
And see what colors you can paint the tanks for next week, Paul. Something a little different, I think.
Well, I think now I have to work up to Patriots Day is coming up.
Patriots Day, yeah.
Oh, sounds like a red, white, and blue set of tanks.
Yeah. All right.
Big dollar sign on them.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.